And welcome back, everyone, to Back in the Day podcast, where we take a look back at our favorite 90s Black sitcoms. I'm Tanya.
And I'm Cheryl. And today we have an exciting episode for you. Not only do we have special guests with us today,
we're also doing the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air reboot, known as Bel-Air from Peacock. And this show is getting a lot of traction right now, you guys. And we want to discuss it, dissect, and give us your opinions, your thoughts.
It definitely has had a lot of traction. It's in my Google feed like literally every day. But I mean, we all know that Google knows more than we do anyway. So but I keep reading all the articles, and unfortunately, I started reading articles before I watched the show. I would not advise doing that. I would go in, if you haven't watched it yet, just go in and read. But you know what else is getting a lot of attention lately is our brother podcast on the Unconfined Network.
The Unconfined, yes.
Today we have invited our brother shows to collaborate with us on this episode so we can hear their opinions as well.
Of course, you guys are probably tired of listening to us all the time. So we decided to bring the fellas in, and we need a male perspective for this one. So guys, jump on in when you can.
Yeah, I don't mean to cut, but Mike can go first because I masquerade as a show, but like Mike is the real show.
You're not a masquerader, Joe. That's not true.
You're the voice of the network, basically.
I'm the Pat Hughes.
Yes.
So for the listeners, the voice that you just heard is the voice that we say at the end of all of our podcasts, and we thank Joe for doing all of the technical work and making us sound professional. Joe, that was Joe. So everybody, congratulations. You're finally meeting through your ears, Joe.
Yeah. Happy to meet everyone. If you haven't heard me before, some people have heard me a nauseating amount, I'm sure. And we might have a few cameo appearances by my dog, who's been running around the house acting like a madman tonight.
Totally acceptable. It's totally acceptable.
Yeah, he's a big fan of Back in the Day, I will say.
And we're a big fan of him.
every time I edit, he's got his ears pointed to my headphones and the screen. So
he's probably listening to that high-pitched laughter that we always have.
Like, what is that?
Yeah.
Right before I take it all out, right before I edit it all out.
Thank God for you. Thank you.
Oh yeah. Oh no, it's a blast, and I'm glad I'm here to share my opinion, my brief opinion, because I literally just rewatched Fresh Prince pilot and the Bel-Air pilot. So I know Cheryl, sometimes you apologize for the perspective you give when you're like, I just recently watched this, and I know Tanya has absorbed this multiple times over the course of her life. So I'll give the same disclaimer that you did on the most recent show where you're like, oh, just be gentle with my opinion, because I'm a first-time viewer. I've definitely seen the original pilot more than once, but it's been quite a long time. So my takes might be a little bit not quite as nuanced, but I'm just happy to be here.
Well, we appreciate it. We also have Mike with us.
Yay.
Hey, Mike. What's up, Mike?
Hello.
Hello.
Yes. I am the host of You're the DJ, I'm the podcaster, also on the Unconfined Network. I'm excited because this is Back in the Day is one of my favorite shows. Well, I don't listen to a lot of podcasts, so I guess it's my favorite show.
Well said.
Yes.
Mike.
So, and Will Smith and Fresh Prince of Bel-Air is one of my favorite topics. Will Smith, I don't want to say it's been my idol, but someone who I've looked up to since 1988. So I followed his every step and every move, and even this show. I've watched it progress from a fan video and then draw traction to catching the eyes of people on YouTube until it got to Will Smith and his team and become to what it is now. So it's incredible to watch the journey of how this show became an actual show.
Mm-hmm. So I didn't know it had that trajectory. I didn't know it started with like a YouTube concept.
Oh yeah, it was a fan-made video. And it was about 90 seconds. And it was on Instagram at first, like 2 years ago. No, maybe 2 years ago. and it was out there, and it finally, and this is when Will Smith finally, he was just getting on Instagram, and it finally caught his eye, because it was like, wow, this is completely different than, but it was good. It was very, very well made, and it's very, I don't want to say identical to what the show is now, but it's very much the same to what it is the show is. And so yeah, Will caught it, and I guess they decided, but
It's time.
yes,
Yeah.
It's time. Now is the moment.
yeah, so
That's awesome. That's cool to hear that information about it. And I'm glad to have you here because I've been on your show. So it's due time that you are on back in the day.
That's
But
right, Mike.
we also know what a fan you are of Will Smith. So we're excited
Yes.
to have you here to hear your perspective.
well, thank you.
And Mike, are you aware that he won the SAG award?
I
And did you see the speech?
literally had the I'll completely be honest with you. I had the sound down on my TV literally the entire award show until that point. And then I didn't think he was going to win, but I was very hopeful. And then I saw that he won, and I think he was as shocked as I was. And so, yeah, I elated that
Well, do you think it's a sign of, the big one?
I think it, yes, because he,
The
the
big
one thing
one, listeners, meaning like the Academy Awards. He's been nominated, and once you start small, winning like the SAG and all those awards, and you kind of work your way up to the Academy Awards, and he's in
Yeah.
the running for sure.
it's
a
like the next
possibility.
one. It's like if you win this one, you're probably going to win the Oscar.
Correct.
And
Yeah.
the one thing about Will is when he gets in these roles and he really puts himself in it, like he is in it. And it's finally, I think he's finally going to get some due because it's a great story.
Mhm.
And it was, I mean, yeah, he really put himself into it. So I'm very hopeful. It's, I would love to see it happen. Let's put it that way. So I'm hopeful.
Me too. Well deserved.
Very
So
well
again, this is Bel-Air season 1, episode 1, Dreams and Nightmares.
And you can find Bel-Air exclusively on Peacock. We're going to be doing episode 1 today on a regular feed here, and you will be able to hear Back in the Day do the rest of Bel-Air on our Patreon feed, which launches March 3rd. So coming to you very soon. If you're interested in hearing us break down the rest of the show, go to patreon.com/back in the day, and you can subscribe at the no scrubs level to hear the rest of
I
Bel-Air.
don't want no scrubs. Well, as always, you guys, we always pick out a dynamic duo. And because you guys know that Cheryl and I are a dynamic duo. And on the flip side, we have Mike and Joe, who are also a dynamic duo in the Unconfined Network. Woo, woo. And for this pilot, what do you think, Cheryl? I'm going to say Will and Carlton. Carlton in this Bel-Air is something else, let me tell you. I don't know if I should divulge everything in case people haven't seen all of it, but my oh my.
Yeah, well, we're gonna break it down. So if you haven't seen it, pause, go watch it, and come back. But
Right.
I have Will and Carlton in my notes, but I also think it could be Will and his mom, because I think that was
Yeah.
something that was missing in the original Bel-Air. There was no like relationship dynamic between Will and his mom, and like being in West Philly. So I have those two in my notes. What do you guys think is a pair that would have like led the show or been a pinnacle amount of the show?
I would say with the funny answer being the music and the visuals, because I think it kept my attention the whole way. The way it was shot and the way the soundtrack was underneath it, it was very appreciated for me. And I know the whole format has changed. It's not a sitcom anymore. It's a single camera. So the non-silly answer I'll give is kind of, we got more into it at the end of the pilot, but another angle we didn't really see from Will immediately, what I'll say the dynamic duo maybe is Will and Lisa. because there's a really interesting dynamic that we got early on in this series that we didn't get early on in the original Fresh Prince, is like the love interest. And I think there was some pretty powerful symbolism at the end of the episode of the new run, in terms of like, is Will going to succeed and can he do it by himself? And there was a whole moment in the pool, which I don't want to spoil, but I think that's like a dark horse candidate for dynamic duo. I know Will and Carlton's probably the headliner here, but Will and Lisa, there's definitely something going on.
That's a good one, Joe. That's a good one.
I do agree with you on the way it was shot and the music and the cinematography and everything. Like it was very, the symbolism and a lot of the way that, like, I don't know if you noticed that there was like a crown on his sweatshirt, like lots of crowns in different areas, the backdrops, the music was always very poignant. And I agreed with you that it stuck out more than, I mean, because obviously Will Smith was a rapper and a musician before he started doing this. So that was always tied in, but it was very well blended with the scene and the genre and the way they changed it. I agree with you on that. What about you,
What are your
Mike?
thoughts?
Joe kind of picked mine as well. Like Will and Carlton obviously are going to stand out because they're just natural as it works out. But I was caught more off guard by the whole Lisa thing and how that kind of, like, you didn't see that before, and so that kind of was like, oh, okay, this is you'd look for things that make things different from the other show besides it like not being a comedy, and that was one of the things, like, oh, okay, you're giving me more substance, and I appreciated that. So yeah.
And you guys, I also just had a thought that maybe another dynamic duo would be Will's mom, because she sort of brings him to a certain point in life, and Aunt Viv, because she sort of propels him forward once he gets to Bel-Air. So it's the mom in the beginning, he gets to a situation, she makes a decision that he doesn't agree with, and then she propels him forward with the help of Aunt Viv, and then that continues the show. So it could be those two also.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I do think it's interesting how they made a point to show that, I mean, he's only been in the pilot in Bel-Air for 2 days, but he's still keeping in touch with his mom. Which I don't think the original show really bothered to touch on, like the fact that he's constantly connected. So I think, if anything, the strong female like role model for Will, I think, is continuing as a different person here with his mom and then at Viv. But to see that through line is and how they compare and contrast, because what I didn't pick up the first time, and I guess it's because I hadn't seen the pilot in so long, is that Aunt Viv is his mother's sister, and that he wasn't the nephew of Uncle Phil, which obviously, like, there are going to be people who are like, duh. But
I was the same way, Joe, because I did the same thing. I watched the pilot of the original. I watched the pilot here, and I caught the same thing. I was like, oh, I didn't realize that it was the moms that were related. Obviously, the last name would have clued me in, but I didn't catch that. So
right. Yeah, no, I didn't even think to connect those dots, and for them to highlight, how much more like he looks like he's going to be leaning on Aunt Viv early on in this reboot. It'll be an interesting through line. And another thing I caught, this is completely irrelevant, but when Ashley in the original pilot made Will the poster to welcome him in, it's WIL. It's not WILL.
I did see that. I did see that on the flower pot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good catch.
Another thing I learned is just Will with one L and not two L's.
Yeah, I caught that too. So the beginning of the show, obviously I was shocked. I didn't realize how different it was going to be. So I think the start of the difference was just the theme song, how it started, the beginning of it. What did you guys think of that?
Mike, if you want to take this one first.
Again, because I had seen the original fan made video, I kind of knew that it was going to be have a more, I don't want to say the WB tone to it, but a more definitely a more serious tone to it.
So explain to the listeners what the WB tone means.
WB tone means they turn everything into a dramatic sitcom. Everything gets the dramatic feature. The end of the world is going to come until the next commercial. Pretty much. And so I kind of knew that expectation was coming. And I was okay with it because again, um, I've seen 20 years of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. I was definitely ready for a different style of storytelling. So I wouldn't say I kind of expected it going in. But I was more impressed how well done it was. It was just like Joe was talking about, just how the music and the cinematography and everything, and like,
Excellent.
oh
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
that was, and so that was the more impressive part for me, that they was so well made and well done. It's like, oh, this is great.
And well
Yeah.
cast, I might add, because
Yeah.
this young Jabari Banks, I'm so in love with him all of a sudden. He plays the perfect Will, and it's just he seems to have like a natural ability for this character. So it's he plays the tough Philly dude trying to he embodies Will in every turn in the episode. I love it.
Yeah. I thought he was great. And it's, even though it's so different, it's still some of the same, because it had some through lines where it's the West Philly. He's supposed to be, kind of this tough guy, but kind of doesn't really want to have to be the tough guy until he has to be the tough guy.
All right.
And very strong allegiance to his friends, strong allegiance to West Philadelphia. Doesn't
Mhm.
really know a lot about his cousins in Bel-Air. And I didn't realize it until, again, watching the pilot, that they're, if we see family in my life, we see them all the time. So you wouldn't like not realize that you had all this family in another state. So, but that was a through line from the other show that kind of carried through. So even though there was a vastly different way to present it, they still kept like a lot of the things consistent.
Right.
I really liked.
Yeah, I there were two main things that kind of struck me outside of everything you guys just said. In the whole basically opening, like cold open, was like
Mhm.
almost half the episode, because we saw
Yeah.
the title scene 20 minutes in, and I was like, oh, okay, that's pretty wild that they took that amount of time to like give you the backstory. I really like to see or I really liked what they did with like putting everyone on game in terms of how good Will is at basketball, because I know it was alluded to so much in the previous series, but now we're seeing like, hey, the scouts from VCU are here for you, you're going to get a D1 scholarship. Like there's a lot on your skill, and that he wasn't just I don't know, some quirky kid from West Philly who then just got in a random altercation. Like there's a lot more depth to the story here. So I really appreciate, because I know they did plenty of episodes in the original series on like, Will's investment in basketball, and then also through the 90s, like how the culture exploded around that he fits perfectly into. So I appreciate what they did to set that up there. And the second point, I completely lost my train of thought. So maybe I could pick that up later. But yeah, that was my impression on the intro. I had a second point completely gone from my head right now.
Well, it'll come back to you for sure.
Yeah, maybe. Or I
Well,
could just cut this whole part out.
you will not. You will not do any such thing. But watching the first, like you said, Joe, the 20 minutes or so, it reminded me a lot of the book. And I got a lot of history about Will and how he got started and how Fresh Prince actually came along. So watching it, so I was like, oh wow, this is kind of like reminiscent of the things that he discussed in his actual book. And so it was a very interesting dynamic watching it and then reading it, because they're very similar. And I thought that was a really nice touch to add in there.
Yeah, I was gonna mention that. Like, if you know anything about Will's life, you can see the added pieces of what he really, like, his, again, like you said in the book, of like really what happened in there. And it's not just the, again, the comedic sitcom that we saw before. It's like, oh, this is more in depth of it's your story. It's more
Mhm.
your story that you're telling us. So
Right. Yep.
I do remember now. You were right, Tanya.
Yay.
I really do like, and I wasn't aware that a lot of the inspiration came from his book. I haven't read the book, but that's good to know. But also, I like the fact that it highlights. I know Cheryl was saying like his allegiance to West Philly,
Mhm.
and his like real apprehension to ever leaving his position as like the man he built himself up to be in that position. And I think that highlights something that a lot of people who aren't necessarily in that position question all the time. I think because it's a very easy take to the old show or the new show, be like, oh, hey kid, you won the lottery, like just like
Mhm.
relax in your new luxury life and like
Yeah.
chill on all the outrage against it. But um I mean, this happens so often in Chicago when people are like, oh, why don't you just remove yourself from that? And obviously there's no simple explanation
Yeah.
as to how people are financially or practically or logistically going to do that. But there's also an element there of like, I've built myself into, in Will's case, the basketball player I am, the student I am, the person I
Yeah.
am socially in this, he said specifically, this 14 block
Yeah.
radius.
yeah,
Yeah. This is
Um,
his community. It's all he knows. It's what he's good at. It's what he loves. It's dangerous. It's chaotic at
mhm.
times, but to him, it's home. And there's, no place like home.
And that's a very real world thing from West Philly to Chicago to
Mhm.
anywhere else you could find it. I'm glad that they kind of um, let you look through that lens where he's like revolting against, like I said, you could easily say he won the lottery overnight,
Mhm.
especially getting out of jail, like a get out of jail free card almost, into this like lavish lifestyle, and be like, okay, then the show's over right there for the majority of people. But it's not quite as simple as that. And I'm glad that
no,
this new show took the time to kind of
it's
explain that.
it's and I'm kind of glad that you said that and this that story is there because you're absolutely right. It's something that a lot of us, especially certain like black men, happen, and it's not just black men, but again, some of us are in that position. Whereas again, I grew up in Inglewood, and Inglewood's not was never the safest place. It's clearly not the safest place. It's not the greatest place in the world. However, everyone knows me. I feel safer there than I felt would feel anywhere.
Mhm.
Um, and given the opportunity to leave the neighborhood, like when I went to college or I go somewhere else, or given the out like, and where it's 100 times you would think it's safer and or life is completely different, you still feel safer. You still clamor to be at home. You feel safer at home because you've built a name for yourself. Everyone knows you. You know, you kind of. So I get, I understand that feeling. You know,
It's a level of comfort that you
it's
just kind
very
of,
relatable. That okay,
yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. So
I don't know either if this beginning and how they really showed his life in Philly and his existence, his mom, his school, all of that. I don't know if it would have worked in the first one. I don't know. And how you said, Joe, that like just accept it because you've gone from, this dangerous area to this lap of luxury. Like there's no questioning it. You're not allowed to really debate it. It's just, accept this great thing you're given. And the way they took it in the first one was it was so comedic. And even though there were times that Will put his spin on things, or he was looked at as being different, or there were, tensions between he and Uncle Phil. If they really dissected it the way they did in this one, I don't think it would have been successful
Mhm.
because of the format, because it was more of a sitcom, and just because of the way the world was then.
Mhm.
Where now, at 16, you have more autonomy to say, like, thanks, but no thanks. Like, this is not really what I want. Plus, he had, allegiances to his friends. I think he felt
Mhm.
responsible for what was going to end up happening to his friend after him leaving. Like, there was just more responsibility that he had at home that he had to really grapple with and adjust to. where like just, hey, getting out of the situation at this point of his life, what didn't seem like it was like, yeah, this is the greatest gift ever. This is actually like punishment.
Right.
And
Yeah,
what
no.
I actually loved was the lyrics. I got into one little fight. My mom got scared.
Yeah.
She said, "You're moving with the auntie and uncle in Bel-Air." And so from reading the book and then watching the original and then now this show, now you see a little bit more of a backstory.
Yeah.
Because when he says those words, it doesn't seem like, oh, just one little fight. You know, mom, she's tripping. Why'd she do that? But now we see is a lot more to the fight and what happened as a result of it. And he kind of had to for safety reasons. I never understood the dynamics of that until I watched Bel-Air.
Yeah.
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 Much more serious situation for sure.
Yeah. I think the fact that like the premise were like out the gate with a gun charge in
Yeah.
this new series is like makes it basically completely derivative of the original series, because I also think, Cheryl, to your point, that like you couldn't really explore, like in many ways we haven't progressed since 1990, but in other ways as a society and as culturally, like we have evolved into accepting like a very wide array of storytelling. And I think if you were to bring, especially like the way they're creatively telling this story, like really getting gritty about what life really looks like in West Philly and places similar to it, if you were to bring that to like a network executive, you don't have the first show in 1990 because they probably don't greenlight that. But yeah, I definitely appreciate the direction creatively they're taking with this, and to know it reflects the book. It's something I didn't know, which is something I'll watch the rest of the episodes, keeping in mind that this is kind of closer to Will's life. But I will say sometimes when they try to interject some of the lingo, it does get a little cringy. It does make me kind of want to hit mute a few times.
Like the John, that's a Philly thing, John.
I love that they brought it out. I love when they said John and like bull and like all this stuff. That's like, and also I love how they capture, like, I don't know if you guys remember the scene, and I don't want to get too far ahead of myself here, but the scene right after the basketball game, and you have, you know, the kid on the bike popping the wheelie, and like riding right past, like popping wheelies on motorcycles and bikes and strikers and stuff like that. That's a very, very Philly thing.
Very Philly thing.
And I'm really appreciative of how they really, obviously if Will's got a hand in it, he's gonna have, you know, creative say in a lot of these things he's experienced, and like the selection of music being largely from like Philly or Philly adjacent artists, with a lot of Meek Mill. I love Meek Mill. That was very well done, but just like interjecting the lingo, like they could have done with a little bit less of it, I think. But I hope they iron it out. I think if you guys have seen Creed,
yes,
they did it very tastefully when they had like all of the dialogue obviously being so Philly influenced. So I hope it kind of takes that direction the next 9 episodes, because there are definitely some cringy moments, especially like when Aunt Viv and like Hillary, the new Hillary, were like, well, Hillary had her own like social media lingo going on, which is equally cringy. But yeah, I hope my hope is that, you know, the creative direction continues, but maybe that gets toned back a little bit.
So bringing up some of the, I'm sorry, go ahead, Tanya.
I was going to say that the dynamics you bring up Hillary, and the 2022 Hillary is not the same Hillary that we all knew.
No, not at all.
And the 2022 Carlton is someone that I want to punch him in the face. He's just
Bizarro World Carlton.
He's so bad that it's good, you know. So it's definitely worth watching. This pilot was so much fun, and the bringing it out the old with the new and the music. And I love one of my favorites in the pilot was when he's out in the backyard and he asks, "Hey, can you make me a Philly cheesesteak?" And he does it.
Yeah.
Like you're in Bel-Air asking this gourmet cook to make you a Philly cheesesteak, and he does it. So that's a really good dynamic to bring in, to kind of, they're always tying Philly and Bel-Air together. Cringy at sometimes, I agree, but yeah, they still a good connection.
So what I was going to say is let's talk about some of the cast, because obviously, you know, we've kept the same people, we've kept the same roles, but obviously the casting is vastly different. And and we can start with like Aunt Viv and Uncle Phil, or we can go right into the meat of the story and go out with Carlton. So you guys decide.
Well, first I'd like to say that Jeffrey is now the new title for 2022 house manager.
House
Mhm.
manager,
You know.
yeah. Yeah.
Don't get it twisted. It's the house manager.
Yes,
Right.
and did you notice that when Hillary was cooking, he was sitting there on his phone, like setting up the appointments for the day? He was not cooking.
Yeah.
And I like how they made that distinction because I watched the original pilot again before this, and there was that whole entry dialogue between Will and Jeffrey where he's like, I'm having a hard time calling you a butler and having you call me master. So I'm glad they addressed that
I am
pretty
too.
astutely.
Yeah.
I am
Absolutely.
too. Yeah. Yeah. He did call him Benson.
Mhm.
And
well,
in the,
Oh, and
in the
Idris.
first, yeah.
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 Oh no, yeah, in the first one, yeah.
In the
Benson,
first one, he
yeah.
called him
First-
Benson. Yeah.
And this
Yeah,
one he
the
called him
Idris one was
Idris.
hilarious. I saw
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. The Jeffrey character is quite different, but I think it's the right way to do it.
yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Definitely do.
Absolutely.
And then, so the next person we meet, well, we what about Jazz? They still were able to work Jazz into this.
Yeah, and Jazz has like a way more major role in Bel-Air, and the way that he met him in this version was just totally different from the old version. So I love both of them, but you know, you got to love Jazz, and you have to have them incorporated into the show somehow, and they did a really good job of making that happen.
Yeah.
I thought
So-
it was creative.
Please don't beat me up for this, but how did Will meet
Uh-oh.
Jazz in the original?
He just kind of showed up.
Yeah,
Okay.
like a couple episodes in, he just kind of was
Just
there,
kind of showed up.
and every
Okay.
time he shows up, he gets thrown out.
Yeah. Well, I know that much. So those are
Yeah.
pretty iconic. I will say my initial take on it was like they probably wrote the pilot out and then they're like, oh man, how do we get Jazz in here? Like, oh, Will's hitchhiking from the airport and just like got in a car with him, you know? But
I have
just
to say before you go on, yeah, that was a little bit weird because in the original he took a cab and he
Mhm.
didn't like make a point to say that he was an Uber driver or a Lyft driver.
Yeah,
He
Just the
was
guy.
just driving him, but he was in the back seat. So that was a
Mhm.
little bit ambiguous there. So I agree
Yeah.
with you. Like, did he just hitchhike or are we doing that in 2020?
That's what I'm saying. Like, who in their right mind, especially like someone from like West Philly, I'm not sure you're hopping in the back seat with, you know, complete strangers.
stranger.
But I wonder if some of the symbolism there is like this good Samaritan, like looking out for him, because he's one of the only people we find with new Will being like non-adversarial off the jump. He's like pretty much his solace right now. So I wonder if there's like the symbolism of him being like, you know, his like guardian angel in terms of like, this guy just showed up and got me where I needed to go.
Yeah.
And like he was gonna be his way to get out of this situation too. And he was like there, no questions asked. Obviously he was there
Yeah.
for the money too, but he was there to pick him up and take him back to the airport when Will wanted to leave. So I think that's really interesting how he just showed up. I don't know. I that was definitely something that stuck out to me. But to know that was presented roughly similarly in the original series, that makes me kind of question it a little bit less.
For those of us that have not watched further and have only seen this one, it came across to me that like we have to have Jazz in here somehow.
Mhm.
So let's just like plop him in here. It felt a little
Mhm.
placed. And now obviously, Tanya, you've binged the entire season. So maybe we'll see more from Jazz and that character will develop more. But it did seem like, I don't want to say an afterthought, but it was like, hey, we got to find a way to get him in. And maybe that storyline at the beginning wasn't worked out as well as it could have been.
Yeah, that was the vibe I got from that as well.
Yeah. So on Viv, let's go to on Viv next.
Well, he
Mike, if-
walks in, and Aunt Viv is just so excited to see him. You know, she sort of smooths things over with Jeffrey because he doesn't know quite what to make of Jeffrey at first. Like, why are you trying to touch my bags? Like,
Mhm.
bro, what are you doing?
Right.
And so enters Aunt Viv, and she explains everything. Jeffrey takes his bags to his room, and then you get this, you know, your cousins are here. You see this grandiose house, which is bigger and way more badass than
Yeah.
the original. Even just the drive up, I'm like, oh my God, I gotta go to Bel-Air. What am I doing wrong here? It is fantastic. So that whole, I left mom and now I'm here with Auntie Viv, that's a really good point in the show too, because now you're starting a new life, maybe a better life. You don't forget where you came from, but this is something new, and you have to either embrace it or hate it or love it, whichever you choose, but you're here, so you got to make it work.
And I think she's going to be that equilibrium for him, like we talked about a little bit, that role model, that because she came from where he came from. So it's a little bit more of a relatable of like at the end, she says, like, you have to adapt, like, you don't have to leave yourself, but you have to adapt to what you're doing. So she's going to always be able to give him, like, I've been where you were. I understand what you're going through.
Yeah.
I'm the mother figure, but she's going to be that, for lack of a better term, that Mr. Gaines. It's going to have the, the through line, the wisdom of the show.
I thought Mike, you were gonna say something.
Oh
But,
no, I was agreeing like 100% with Cheryl, because you're like, it's her sister. It's her sister's son. She's more relatable to him than anyone else there. So if
He's
anyone's
a
going to,
breath of fresh air when he walks through. You
Yeah.
could tell, you could see it
yeah,
on her face, and she's like, "Oh my God, I'm so glad you're here." So she needed that little burst from home.
100%.
yeah,
Yeah. So
and
go ahead.
I saw it, like, having just watched both pilots, like, she runs an equal amount of interference in both scenarios, but like
Yeah.
in the original pilot, she's like more directly like, no, talk to me, don't talk to Uncle Phil, who's like scolding you for like talking the way you're talking, like, oh, let's catch up. And then in this one, the interference she's running is to kind of calm the new bizarro Uncle Phil down after he's like, oh, I stuck my neck out for this kid, and I do want to help him, but I don't want to. Well, I think the Uncle Phil tangent got so much more adversarial and a lot darker really, really quick, because
Quickly, yeah.
you can now chalk up the entire motive for, you could say, the entire series existing to being like a campaign ploy. They presented Uncle Phil, and this is what Aunt Viv was talking him down about. He's running for district attorney. He's a very accomplished lawyer, and he, in a speech, says he's very tired of the school to prison pipeline, which is a very real issue. But then one of the friends, the donors at the party, like, reaches out and grabs Will's shoulder, like, yeah, like, I know, and so there could already be like a malicious agenda at work, where Will is being brought out as this like showpiece of like, oh, look at this kid I saved prison out of the good of my own heart to give him a better education, when in reality he's trying maybe to leverage that into a position of office. So it was really interesting to see, Aunt Viv running that different kind of interference, where in the original pilot it's the jokey like, oh, don't let Uncle Phil scare you, but like in this one it's like, no, like, this is my nephew, and like we love him and we're looking out for him, and like you also shouldn't be paranoid thinking that like he's gonna spill the beans on you because of what you did on his behalf. But then what you did on your behalf, was that malicious? Was that an agenda? Was that a campaign thing? Like, so there's like a lot of really open-ended, and it could get dark really quick in terms of like the new Will and Uncle Phil dynamic, with now that you inject the campaign and like him getting him out of prison off the gun charge. I thought
the Uncle Phil and the Carlton in this Bel-Air are really, man, they're two really strong, sometimes anti-Will personalities, and he has to kind of juggle the both of them. He's cool with Hillary and Ashley and Viv, but man, Uncle Phil and Carlton are something else.
Yeah, I'm curious to see where that goes and towards the end of the season. But yeah, it seems to be and maybe it has something to do with Will, again, growing up with his mom, and Aunt Viv being a strong figure, woman figure in his life. So, and I don't know, it could be just a dynamic of him growing up with women and around women, knowing just relatable to more to women. I don't know. Like I said, I'm very curious to see how it plays out.
I am too, because watching the first one again, you could see that the Uncle Phil in the Fresh Prince was very much trying to emulate a father figure, that personality of a father figure. Like he was stepping in to remind Will of like making good decisions, and the reason is, why. And it wasn't like, this is like, these are the rules, this is my house, you're gonna do this. Like there's no flexibility here, and he didn't come across to me like he had any interest in being a father figure to Will. It was like, you're going to follow my rules, you're going to say this, you're here for a better education, that's the line. It seemed very politically motivated, that it was like, and they had said, the kids had said, oh, we'll make him suffer the same thing we have to, is stand up there and smile and look a certain way and be a certain part because it fits what we need it to be. But like, he's seeing right off the bat that Will's not going to fit in, and there's no like empathy for what Will's going through. It's like, you've decided to come here now, you're on my agenda, this is what we have to do. So I agree with you, Mike. I'm interested to see how that's going to turn out, because it was not the warm and fuzzies from Uncle Phil that we had from James Avery. So
oh, keep on watching. I can't say more, but just keep watching.
All right.
I do find it really interesting that we're talking about like the parallels between the two pilots, that they got all the big pieces, but the one big piece I think they kind of missed, since we were talking about Uncle Phil, is there's that moment in the original pilot when after the dinner he's like chastising Will, and Will feels out of place. He's like slumped over the piano and he starts playing an aria, and Uncle Phil comes in and he's like, he has that moment where like that smile indicates that like, oh, maybe he's more than I gave him credit for. There was no like small, I guess you could make an argument that like Uncle Phil running out to pay off Jazz to bring Will back in the house is like the moment where he's like, no, I'm not going to give up on you. But there was no parallel moment where there's like, okay, maybe the Will and Uncle Phil dynamic can be more familial instead of just transactional. I think it was purely set up as a transactional relationship. To this point. I know Tanya said just wait. So I
trust me, Joe. Just trust me.
Okay, for the next 9 episodes, we'll see you get proven right. But yeah, I found that kind of strange that there was no like, lovey-dovey. I'm sure like you could see that the new Uncle Phil has the capacity, because like obviously when they're all around the table for breakfast, he's like,
there was a break there, yeah.
Super supportive of everyone. He's trying to be the mediator, running, all the kids are arguing with each other and he's like, oh, I don't care, like we're gonna support you no matter what. And like, so there's that side to him, obviously, and I think I don't think he's just hit his stride with Will just yet.
So should we move to Carlton?
Man.
Oh boy.
Carlton is whoa.
Every show needs a villain.
Yeah.
Every
who
show
would have
needs a
thought
bad guy.
that they would make that villain Carlton of all people?
Yeah.
He's sort of like the man. Like he's sort of, totally opposite from the Carlton that I remember, but in a good way. Like he really makes you think a little bit like, wow, he's got a lot of power in this show.
Yes. Yeah.
Tanya, I know you're ahead, but I found the 2 cliffhangers that were given in this one about the one was when Lisa was like, well, don't you know what Carlton's been through?
Yeah.
And so I'm eager to get into what that backstory is, because based on how he's acting in this, in this pilot towards Will, how he's so territorial and protective, and he thinks, well, Bel-Air is his West Philly. He's the man here.
Absolutely.
So you have someone like stepping on his turf like that, he already senses him as a threat. And then the other cliffhanger is when Uncle Phil, he's like, I felt terrible for that kid ever since his dad, and then he didn't finish that sentence.
Yes.
So I'm assuming we'll get some clarity on both with the the next 9 episodes, or it's a 10 episode order, right? The 10
I believe
episode
so,
first
yeah.
season?
It's 10.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, so I'm sure over the next 9 episodes they'll show that a little bit, but the initial impression of Carlton is just like I think it hits a lot harder because the majority of the cast maintained the dynamic with Will.
Mhm.
Uncle Phil pivoted and could stand to pivot a lot more if this is all politically motivated, but the biggest pivot, the complete 180, is Carlton. Like there's really no similarity other than the fact that they're both shorter and have like the Napoleon complex. And Carlton's sport of choice happens to be lacrosse this time around. I think that
Right.
those are really the only similarities. And then like we're in the metaverse of Fresh Prince at this point.
Yeah. And you can see it in the first few episodes of season of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air that this really was Carlton's world. Like
Mhm.
this was his territory. He was in all these sorts of clubs. This was all his friends. He for all extensive purposes, Carlton was the man in Bel-Air on the original TV show. But it was again presented in such a comedic way that, well, you got 30 minutes. Well, you got to immediately Will comes in and Will's now the cool guy. Well, that was Carlton. And now we get to see it all played out that no, this really was Carlton's world. And now here's this threat to
Yeah.
everything. So it's yeah, I can see what and 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 I guess it's kind of like dogs. You kind of do get territorial about it, and so I like how it's again, every show needs a villain, and you can see why Carlton would become a villain if someone came and threatened everything that you knew. Yeah, it's very entertaining,
Mm.
pretty much.
Can we get into Hillary for a little bit? I absolutely love this new 2022 Hillary. I love the old one also. But this Hillary has a job, you guys. Like she actually
Yeah.
wait a minute. Is this the same? How could this be? She knows how to cook.
Yeah.
She's using social media as her buffer to get her career. What is happening with the new Hillary? I love her. She's still very naive, very sheltered. This whole move-in situation with other influencers, the influencer house, it's quite interesting. But I like the new Hillary.
I liked her too. I thought
Yeah.
it was, I mean, there's no way that they could have had the old Hillary persona because I think it's just, it wouldn't have fit today. It wouldn't have been believable.
Yeah,
But
true.
as obnoxious as it was at the beginning that she was like live streaming this party and everything, like that's a reality. Like that's,
Mhm.
I mean, you go anywhere you go and there's somebody streaming something just because, oh, there's a sale on grapes at Jewel today. Like it's,
Yeah.
you're walking down the aisle at Target and someone's putting it on their TikTok. So, I mean, that's just reality.
Yeah.
So I thought it was the most appropriate way to present her.
Yeah, I feel like it's this decade's equal
Stereotype.
obnoxious
Oh,
annoying
yeah.
version of, because
Mhm.
like Hillary's first line in the original is like, "Dad, I need $300." And so then the new Hillary's first line in this new one is, about how she's reaching out to her followers and she has almost 100,000 followers and she's going to get into this cooking magazine and she's going to create a career off cooking. And so like she's still annoying,
Yeah.
but it's annoying for a purpose. Like
Yeah.
even in the original pilot, she's Hillary's, pretending to be this huge major advocate for like restoring the ozone, and they were really
Mhm.
they were really ahead of the time in terms of like trying to warn people about global warming, because we're talking about like 32 years ago they were trying to take this more seriously. But obviously with Hillary, she was just like doing it for to be out with all these celebrities and
Right.
Yeah,
doing
the
it for a good
notoriety.
cause.
Yeah.
Because they're like, "Oh, where can I send the check for donation?" She's like, "I don't know. Like, how am I supposed to know that?" So like they really removed the whole like the ditziness from Hillary, which I really appreciate, because I think like I don't know if Hillary got her proper due in the first series with that as her base of character. So in this new series, they had to find a way, to not entirely strip the annoying from her, but they have a perfect vehicle with her being like a social media influencer.
Right.
I think everyone can relate to that being a little bit of annoying, but also there's skill in that, and you can't deny that like she obviously seems to be doing well with it. So it's a nice take on Hillary, and I do appreciate the new version of her representation.
And
What
I
I
think
find interesting also is the relationship between Hillary and Aunt Viv. It's very much Clash of the Titans. There's some backstory that as you continue to watch, you see where kind of the friction comes from. But it's definitely a challenging mother-daughter duo. That could be another dynamic duo because the two of them, they sort of love to hate each other at times.
but she was also really, really welcoming of Will. I think we needed that because we weren't going to get that from Carlton, from or I mean, we got a little bit from Ashley, but there wasn't as much as there was in the first one. But there was, aside from Aunt Viv, you needed somebody else to kind of be his advocate. And even though Aunt Viv was like not sure if she wanted him at the party, she's like, okay, at least let's go get him dressed appropriately. And Hillary show him where his room is and everything. So like you needed somebody else to be kind of on Will's side and excited that a cousin that they didn't really know very well was there. Weirdly, this just popped into my head. The other thing is we see a lot more of the house in this show, because in the first one more you saw like the living room and the kitchen. And I think one time you saw the backyard or a couple times, but you really, a few bedrooms here and there, but there was a lot more of the house itself in this show.
And one of my favorite parts is Will jumping the fence to get in the car. It's like, Will, I'm pretty sure there's like another side door you don't have to climb. Probably $1 million wrought iron
right
to escape.
So was the original shot on a set or in an actual house?
I think on a set.
On a
probably,
set.
Yeah, because I think they wanted to, now that they have the technology and the access to an actual like badass mansion, I think they wanted to make a point of showing it off, which I think they did pretty well. I did find it a little rushed when like he comes in and the party's going on and he talks to Aunt Viv. And then she's like, oh, I got to go see Hillary. And then Hillary gets him dressed. And then she's like, oh, you should meet this person. And then Carlton's like, I'm going to go talk to Ashley. And like, obviously they needed the baton passing moment to get him to all the characters. But it kind of felt weird when like Ashley's first correspondence with him was like 30 seconds. And she's like, okay, I'm going to go find Hillary. And then like that led him into his next, it felt a little rushed. But I think what you guys are alluding to is like the only person giving him comfort outside of Aunt Viv in the original pilot was Ashley, and they have that whole thing where like she becomes the rapper, and then at dinner she says grace and it's a rap, and like but then they're also cracking jokes at Carlton's expense, and we find the new Hillary doing that instead of the new Ashley, because when she's getting him dressed, she's like, oh, all these suits are for Carlton for the growth spurt that never happened. Like where she's trying to show like, I'm on your team here. I'm going to welcome you immediately. You're kind of like you're almost the brother I wish I had, which is something Ashley directly says in the first pilot.
Yeah.
To that, but the new Hillary doesn't quite say that outright, because I think Hillary and Carlton, in the new version, have a workable dynamic, but it seems like she's playing the welcomingness of Ashley in this, because we didn't see too much from Ashley in this new pilot. A little bit in terms of like, how she's 12 years old and on this crazy trajectory because she's also living this sheltered and lavish lifestyle. But we didn't really see too much from Ashley in this new pilot, as opposed to like she really was like the main funny piece of the first pilot outside of Will, and like Will's influence on Ashley in the original pilot.
Yeah. And I think you're right about the party where they were kind of passing him off and it was quick, but I think it almost had to be because they had to open up that space for Lisa, where that was something that was not included in the original one, is to have another character there to start to build on that. obviously the season is only 10 episodes and shows are only whatever 30 minutes. So to introduce that character right off the bat took up some of the family time that maybe they'll be able to make up in other episodes.
Yeah.
It's just my guess, but they needed to have that. They needed to establish the dynamic all the way from the beginning of like, oh, he's interested in Lisa, she's interested in him. That's Carlton's ex. Now we've already got that triangle started and more friction between Carlton and Will.
Mhm.
Right, that's a good point.
Yeah.
All in all, I absolutely loved. I just loved it. I thought it was well done. A few things I would change, but I'm not the producer, the writer of the show, or the creator. But that's just my own personal preference. But overall, I give it, like a 9 out of 10 for sure. It was just very, very well done, I must say. I loved all the actors. I thought the casting was great. The wardrobe is fantastic. I gotta figure out where that house is, you guys. I don't know. You guys got to come to LA. I promise by the time you get here, I'll figure out where it is. So
just don't try to climb that fence, Tanya.
I won't try
Right.
to climb the fence. I'll ring the bell and maybe the house manager will allow me entry.
There you go.
into the property, but
Absolutely.
I'm fascinated with it. But I think that this show is fun. It has some very serious moments to it. And I think it's a good time. Will has hit his stride and 30 years since the first one, and it's a good time for this to be a reboot. And not all reboots go well, but this one did.
Yeah,
I definitely enjoyed it too. Go ahead, Joe.
No, yeah, I think you're right. It is a good time. I think if they did this earlier, because I think the tone that they're taking and a few of the things that they're highlighting in this first episode, like the whole scene in the locker room with Carlton and his lacrosse team, I think that message about like how are you gonna let a bunch of white guys say the N-word in front of black people, that scene hits a lot differently after a lot of what we've seen recently, unfortunately, in terms of the protests and George Floyd and BLM and everything that's gone on in the time dilation known as COVID. I think this was a really pertinent time to like open this back up. And I know this is the reason you guys are doing back in the days, because you want to highlight, what the show is speaking on socially and how it's relevant. And I think creatively, the path they're taking is they're doing a really good job of leveraging inserting a really poignant message into a vehicle that they know there's an already implicit buy-in in. It's like, oh, Fresh Prince, come for a good time. Will Smith made you laugh, right? And then it's like, think about this and this and this and this.
Yeah.
And like, there's really hard-hitting issues about like it right off the bat when the police run up on Will. They're clearly like overdoing it with him. They're yelling at him to stop resisting. They're kneeling on his head and he's not fighting back. And they try to pin him for the gun charge. They highlight on like gang rivalry and turf wars in West Philly. They highlight on the school to prison pipeline, which I don't think a lot of people are ready to have a discussion about yet, but they threw that in really quickly. And they, they're throwing in this element too of Carlton being involved in illicit drug use, which is
that really hit me like, oh my God.
Which is
this is a whole new Carlton, you guys. I'm telling you.
Because he's
not. So the article that I read, I don't mean to interrupt, but the article that I read had implied the Xanax use, but this is not just Xanax use. Like he's snorting Xanax. I mean, that's a whole different level of using Xanax that I don't even want to go into right now. But I mean, that it shocked me. It just literally, I was like, what? Oh my God.
Right.
I think a lot of things that they present in this version is very modern, very fresh, very up to date. The trauma that the flashbacks that he has, if someone touches him, that he flashes back to the cop touching him. They mentioned briefly about what do you feel about, Black Lives Matter and defund the police and Uncle Phil made a statement about defunding the police in front of one of the police officers there that was at the party. So there's a lot of modern day issues and situations that they address. And I think that's very relevant and very necessary.
Yeah, and I'm glad that they're doing it.
Oh yeah, me too.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Joe, because that was. It's the little things that again, it's more modernized and things that are more relatable to what this generation is seeing and understands and knows. So, yeah, that was good. I appreciate that. It's smarter. I'm glad I want something smarter. I don't want to be taught to in just a sitcom-y way anymore.
Yeah. Because I think it might be a little reductionist to say, but like in the 90s, especially on a sitcom where you have 22 minutes to maybe try and get a message across, like there might be a plot line where like someone gets caught with weed and everyone's like, tisk, tisk, tisk. Don't you know that's bad for you? And so as soon as you get a vehicle like this you stumble into this like well-to-do, very rich, very affluent person abusing drugs, you immediately know that like, okay, there's going to be a whole episode about this in the future. We're going to learn a lot more. But like you guys are all alluding to, this is, I mean, between the original pilot and this pilot, we've had the opioid epidemic. We've had a lot of people in the rap industry get really caught up with Xanax, Percocet, codeine, all this stuff. We've had Juice WRLD, pass away due overdosing. We there are a number of rappers from Chicago who have passed away from overdosing. So it's like a very poignant thing to show, especially in relation to very affluent and wealthy Black men. I think this is a very like you could open a Pandora's box here, but it's something that needs to be explored because this is only becoming more prevalent, unfortunately. So I thought it was a really big leap to take, but I'm glad they're kind of meeting that head on.
100%. Yes, 100%. And again, this is more of the age where God, ironically enough, there's like shoe powder all over my desk now. It's so it's kind of what you said, like a lot of this generation, a lot of music, a lot of rappers, there's a drug culture already that's kind of preached in it. And you talk about Juice WRLD's still all over the radio, and everything he talks about is mental health and drug use, so it's very poignant that it's something that even if we're just starting the topic, that it is a topic in it. So
right.
The other thing I thought was cool is that the creators for this show are the same as the creators for the original Fresh Prince.
Yeah.
So having that consistency, so they're not starting fresh, they're not reinventing the wheel. They know what they did before and they know where they can take it because of the changes in society and the changes in television and the way they can present things. So I think that's important as well, not just to have Will Smith on as a producer, but to have the same creators. I think that helps the show as well.
Yeah, totally agree.
Well, anything else? Final thoughts from you guys?
I think we've said it all. You guys are so great. I love this. Thank you guys.
Thanks for all of your opinions. I can't wait to see where the show goes. I'm really looking forward to it. Obviously, Tanya, I have to catch up to where you are, but we'll be having many conversations again. This will continue on our Patreon feed. So if you are interested in that, patreon.com/backintheday, you can find us there. And thank you guys for coming and joining us tonight. Thank you for listening to us, and thank you for being here to give us your opinion. This was an excellent episode.
Yeah, this was fun.
Thanks for having us.
Lots have to do it again sometime. We have to find another topic and keep it going.
Yeah, absolutely.
We could catch up on the rest of Bel-Air and then have a
That's
final
right.
A recap. Yeah. The finale. I love
season 1 recap.
I love it. Yeah. Well, thank you very much to our supporters. We could not be here without you. So thank you for listening today. And you can find us on all of your favorite podcast platforms at Podcast Back in the Day. So please follow, download, rate, leave us a review, all the things.
And follow us and interact with us on social media. We're on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok at Podcast Back in the Day.
And you can always leave us comments or suggestions on our social channels or email us at backinthedaypod@gmail.com. All of this is linked in our show notes.
So please keep listening. And if you enjoy the show, share our post, share our show, and let others know about the podcast.
We do have some new merch in our shop. It is also linked in the show notes. So for those of you that want to wear and share your support for the show, you can find some new merchandise and some more merchandise coming out shortly in our shop. And don't forget our Patreon launch on March 3rd.
So on March 3rd, we will be launching our Patreon with 4 different tiers of content. So if you'd like to support the show or dive deeper into 90s topics and interact with your favorite dynamic duo and our special guests, join us there.
And Back in the Day is a proud member of the Unconfined Network. Check out all of the shows that we are collaborating with on our network at unconfinednetwork.com. So thank you guys for joining us today.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.